Our parents were leaving for a week-long vacation, and for the first time, they decided not to bring us along. It wasn't that they didn't care about us, but rather, they felt we were old enough to take care of ourselves. I didn't argue. It seemed like a gift of independence, even though I wasn't sure how to handle it. The house felt different when they left. Empty. Quiet. The kind of silence that weighs down on you. Thick and uncomfortable. My brother, David, was 2 years older than me. We'd always been close, in that familiar way siblings are. I admired him. He was charismatic, smart, the kind of guy who always seemed to know exactly what to say or do. Growing up, we had our fair share of fights, but those were the normal sibling squabbles, nothing too serious. But now, something had shifted. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it felt like a change was brewing beneath the surface. David had always been the life of the party, the one who made everyone laugh and never seemed to take things too seriously. But over the past few months, I noticed subtle shifts in him. A quiet confidence I hadn't seen before. He'd get these faraway looks in his eyes, like he was constantly distracted. When I tried to engage him in conversation, it was almost like he was too busy, too distant, as if something or someone else was occupying his mind. And I hated the way it made me feel, like I was being left behind. On the first day our parents were gone, David invited some friends over. I wasn't really in the mood to socialize, so I stayed upstairs in my room. I didn't think much of it at the time. He'd always had people over when our parents were gone, but there was a weird undercurrent to it. Something felt off, even though the house was filled with laughter and noise. There were girls, too, of course. That was another thing I couldn't help but notice. In the past, I never really paid attention to who David was bringing home. I didn't need to. But now, I couldn't ignore it. It was like I was hyper-aware of every glance, every touch, every exchange. I told myself it was normal. He was growing up after all. But when I caught a glimpse of him with one of the girls, laughing and touching her arm a little too closely, I felt something stir inside me. Something uncomfortable. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly, but more like a vague sense of loss. Like something I couldn't have or control was slipping away, and I didn't know how to handle it. I found myself wondering if David had always been like this. Had I just never noticed? It was confusing. We'd always had a special bond. I couldn't really explain it. It wasn't the kind of closeness that made people uncomfortable. It was just the kind of closeness you share with someone you've grown up with, someone you've seen at their worst and best, and everything in between. But now, as I watched him interact with his friends, it was like he was someone else entirely. He was different, and that difference left me with a knot in my stomach. The next day, it happened again. David was upstairs in his room, and I could hear him talking to someone on the phone. I didn't think much of it until I recognized the voice. It was the girl from yesterday. Her laugh, light and easy, drifted through the walls. I couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. It was flirtatious. There was an intimacy in the way they spoke, something I hadn't expected. For some reason, it bothered me more than it should have. Why was I feeling so disturbed by this? I couldn't put my finger on it, but something inside me was changing, slowly, and without warning. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard or seen anything, but another part, something deeper, was pulling me closer, urging me to pay attention. Maybe it was just curiosity. Or maybe I was trying to understand what was happening to the person I thought I knew so well. The thing was, no matter how hard I tried to distance myself from it, the feeling of discomfort didn't go away. It lingered. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, there was a nagging sense that things were about to shift in a way I couldn't control. David's behavior was becoming more erratic, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just the newness of being home alone, the freedom that came with our parents being away. But as days passed, I started to realize it wasn't just that. There was something off about the way David was acting, something that felt more deliberate, more intentional. It wasn't just the girls he was bringing around. It was the way he interacted with them, with everyone really. He'd always been charming, but now he seemed to have this magnetic quality. Like he was the center of attention without even trying. People couldn't help but gravitate toward him. And it wasn't just the obvious stuff. It was the subtle things, the way he'd look at someone, the way he'd speak, like everything he said had double meanings. He was flirtatious, sure, but it was different now. It wasn't innocent anymore. It felt like he was testing boundaries, pushing limits, and seeing how far he could go. I caught myself watching him more closely, studying the way his interactions were changing. He wasn't the same person I had grown up with. There was a new confidence in him, an air of mystery that I couldn't quite place. He never seemed as vulnerable anymore, like he was guarding some part of himself that used to be so open. I hated it. I hated how I couldn't quite figure him out, how he was slipping further away from me, becoming this version of himself that was just out of reach. It didn't help that I started noticing the way I was feeling about him. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment of confusion. But the more time I spent around him, the more it grew. The pull was subtle, but undeniable. I felt an attraction to him that I couldn't justify. It wasn't sexual, not in the traditional sense, but it was something that stirred something deep inside me. I hated myself for feeling it. He was my brother. It was wrong. Yet every time he looked at me, every time our eyes met, I felt it. It was like a current, strong and undeniable, passing between us. I didn't know what to do with these feelings. How could I tell him? How could I even begin to explain what was happening inside me? There was no way. It was too complicated, too twisted. The very idea of it made me feel sick, but I couldn't stop it. The attraction was there, and it felt like it was eating me alive. One night, David invited his new girlfriend over again. Her name was Lisa, and she was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, with a sharp smile that seemed to know more than it let on. I couldn't quite place what I didn't like about her, but there was something about the way she carried herself that made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way she seemed to know exactly how to make David laugh, how she touched his arm casually like they were already something more. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, with that strange, almost knowing expression, like she saw right through me. I stayed in my room that night, telling myself I didn't want to get involved in whatever was going on downstairs. But I couldn't help myself. I found myself listening, straining to hear snippets of their conversation. I wanted to hear how they spoke, how they connected. Part of me wanted to know if they were closer than he and I ever had been. I heard their laughter, the clinking of glasses, the situation between David and me had reached a boiling point, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. There were moments when I couldn't be in the same room with him without feeling this undercurrent of tension, this magnetic force that seemed to pull me in despite every instinct telling me to back off. But I couldn't stop myself. I was trapped in it, trapped in this feeling I couldn't understand, couldn't escape. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't deny it. Something between us had shifted, and it wasn't going away. David had started spending more time with Lisa, which only deepened the sense of alienation I was feeling. They would stay in his room for hours, talking, laughing, doing whatever they did together. I tried to tell myself it was normal. It was his life, his relationship, and I shouldn't have been involved. But I couldn't stop listening for them, couldn't stop wondering what they were doing behind that door. It felt like everything was slipping away. It wasn't just about him being with someone else. It was the fact that I was losing him. He was changing, and I wasn't part of the person he was becoming. It was one night that everything hit me, that everything came crashing down. I was downstairs, trying to distract myself with something on TV, but my mind wasn't there. My mind was still with him, still wondering what they were doing, how close they were getting. The sound of their laughter, the murmur of their voices, filtered down through the walls. I couldn't focus on anything but that. I stood up and moved toward the staircase before I even realized it. I wasn't sure what I was doing, what I thought I would accomplish by standing there, listening. But I couldn't stop myself. Part of me knew I was being ridiculous, that I had no business eavesdropping on them, but the pull of curiosity was too strong. I had to know what was happening. It wasn't until I was standing in the hallway that I realized how stupid this was. I shouldn't be standing here, shouldn't be listening in. But there I was, pressing my ear against the door, straining to catch every word. David's voice, low and casual, came first. "You know, I never realized how easy it is to be myself when you're around," he said. His tone was so different from the one he used with me. There was a certain softness, an intimacy that made my heart twist. Lisa's voice followed, light and teasing. "I can tell," she said. "You're not the same person you were a few months ago. It's like you've changed. In a good way." I felt something inside me snap. The way she spoke to him, the way she had such control over him, it wasn't right. It shouldn't be like this. I wasn't angry at David, not really. He had every right to move on, to find someone who made him feel good about himself. But it was the way it all seemed so effortless, the way they clicked so easily while I was left standing on the sidelines, watching from a distance. I stepped back from the door, but it was too late. I couldn't unhear what I had just heard. And as I stood there, my thoughts spiraling, I realized just how much I had been pretending. Pretending that everything was fine. Pretending that I didn't care that David was slipping further away from me. Pretending that I wasn't affected by the fact that he had found someone else, someone who seemed to fit with him in ways I never could. But the truth hit me hard. The truth was that I had been fooling myself for a long time. I had been lying to myself about the feelings I had for him. I had been in denial, convincing myself that what I felt wasn't real, that it was just some temporary confusion. But it wasn't temporary. It was real. And it was dangerous. I couldn't deny it any longer. The attraction I felt for him, this deep, gnawing pull, it was something I had to confront. But the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it became. It wasn't just about wanting him in the way a sibling might, it was something else, something forbidden, something I wasn't supposed to feel. I could feel myself spiraling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to tell him how I felt. But I knew that would only push him further away. The last thing I wanted was to lose him completely. Yet every time I saw him with Lisa, every time I heard their voices together, I felt that distance grow. I was losing him, piece by piece, and it was tearing me apart. I knew I had to make a choice. I could keep pretending, keep hiding these feelings, and let them consume me until I was nothing but a shadow of who I used to be. Or I could face the truth, confront the reality of what was happening, and try to find a way to navigate this madness. But there was no easy way out. There was no right answer. I walked away from the door that night, my heart heavy with everything I couldn't say, everything I couldn't change. The silence that followed was deafening. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure if I could come back from it. The next few days felt like a blur, a fog of emotions I couldn't clear away. I was suffocating, caught in a web of feelings I couldn't explain or control. David was still distant, lost in his world with Lisa, and I was stuck, drowning in the weight of my own thoughts. I could feel it now more than ever, the way my relationship with him was changing. And it wasn't just that he was moving on. It was that I was being left behind, and no matter how much I tried to fight it, I couldn't stop the feeling that I was losing him in ways that went beyond simple sibling rivalry. I knew I had to say something, do something, but I didn't know where to start. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay. I couldn't keep pretending like I wasn't falling apart inside. So, I decided to confront him, to ask him about everything, to lay it all on the table. It was terrifying, but it felt like the only option left. There was no more pretending, no more avoiding the truth. When I finally found the courage to talk to him, it didn't go the way I thought it would. I had imagined a calm, collected conversation, one where I would somehow get the answers I needed, one where I could make sense of everything. But the reality was far messier than that. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked at me like he had no idea what was coming. He had no clue that the very foundation of our relationship was crumbling and that it was all because of him, or more accurately, because of me. The truth was I couldn't hide my feelings anymore. "David," I started, my voice shaky. "We need to talk." He glanced up, his expression shifting into one of mild curiosity. "About what?" I hesitated. There were so many things I wanted to say, but the words were tangled in my throat. "About everything," I